Hey everybody, welcome back to the NC State Insider Podcast. I'm your host, Tucker Sennett, here joining you to discuss the Wolfpack's dominant win over North Carolina, number 16 UNC. Obviously, a diminished North Carolina team that was lacking its two leading scorers in Henry Vesar and Caleb Wilson, but still a very, very important win, a ranked win for the Wolfpack nonetheless, and a dominant ranked win that really showed how much better this NC State team is than a North Carolina team without its best pieces. So there was no serious concern about this game. It felt like the Wolfpack was in control most of the way. It was back and forth early, back and forth a little bit early in the second half, but it never felt like North Carolina was ever going to make a push in this game to really recover and find a way to make it more competitive. So, NC State gets the job done. They moved to 19-9 on the season, or 19-8 on the season, excuse me. And I haven't taken a look at the analytics yet, but I'm sure it provided a bump. Yes, NC State jumps back up to number 23 in the KenPom with this win. Obviously, some things to still shake out around the country over the next couple of days, but this was a big one. Just in terms of recovering from that 67-second debacle against Miami and finding a way to get it done with some weird situations, some injuries, and not a lot of time to scout for this version of North Carolina. And NC State just finds a way to get the job done. So I'll run through the box score here. Some really strong performances. Five players in double figures for the Wolfpack in this one. Darian Williams with 13 points, and it probably should have and could have been many, many more points. Even his head coach, Will Wade, said that after the game. He started the game 3 of 3. He was feeling himself a little bit. The shots were falling early. You could tell the confidence was there. And then bang, he injures his head, goes down in a heap of pain and blood everywhere. He ends up coming out of the game, goes back into the locker room, jersey's covered in blood. Quite a scene. Comes back a few minutes later wearing a number 34 jersey with stitches above one of his eyes. I can't remember if it's right or left off the top of my head, but stitches above the eye. And he comes back, gets back in the game, gets a couple more buckets before his night is over. But just a warrior type effort for NC State's star, more or less, in a night where they needed him. But the real star of the show, the guy who kind of stole everything, uh, was Quadir Copeland, who he was out for blood in this one. He sensed that North Carolina's defense was really leaky, especially at the guard position, and that proved to be true. And with no 7 foot rim protection of Vesar and that wingspan of Caleb Wilson that can cover a lot of ground, Williams and Copeland just bullied this team from a guard standpoint. They hunted mismatches, which is what they want to do, and they did it super successfully in this game. And North Carolina just had no front court reinforcement. So Copeland was backing down guards, finishes with 20 points in the game, 7 of 16 from the field, 6 of 8 from the free throw line, 6 rebounds, 7 assists, few steals in this one. A really, really solid outing for him. Um, comes up with 4 steals, actually. I wanted to get that number right. So a plus 24 for Copeland in the monster win. That ends up being the final margin. So that tells you how important he was to this game. But some others contribute. Matt Abel steps into the game early in this one. Trey Holloman, another guy, gets dinged up for NC State. He tweaked something that looked like his ankle. Comes right out of the game. Played 17 minutes. He ended up coming back, scoring 2 points, 2 rebounds, 2 assists. So Holloman still was able to have an impact, but clearly was not 100% after he tweaked whatever he tweaked in the first, I think it was the first possession of the game. So Abel comes in immediately confident after that really, really nice performance against Miami, sets another career high in this game, scores 19 points, 6 of 10 from the field, made five of his seven shots from 3-point range, did tremendous work on the glass, 6 rebounds in this one, and was a spark plug that this team needed offensively off the bench with Williams out and Holloman out. They needed that fifth scorer kind of, and Abel comes in and provides that punch. The story of the night, more or less, and there will be a feature on NC State on SI on his performance and what it means for this program and what it means for him personally, is Van Allen Lubin, a guy who became the first direct transfer from North Carolina to North Carolina State. Um, you know, didn't feel like his future was as strong as he believed at North Carolina. So he opted to move down the road and suit up for the Wolfpack, suit up for Will Wade in his first season at the helm. And this was sort of a redemption type performance for him. He plays 28 minutes, that number that Wade brought up during the offseason, that UNC fans continue to bring up on social media. And he does his job. 12 points, 6 rebounds, probably more opportunities in the game to make things happen, but being the unselfish and kind of steadying, guiding hand for this team, Lubin just played his role and he played it to perfection in this one. Never felt like he was overmatched by the rotational bigs who have been thrust into big roles for UNC. Those guys did end up scoring pretty well. 13 points for Zayden High, 10 rebounds, a double-double for him before he fouled out. Jaron Stevenson, 13 points, 9 rebounds for him. So a near double-double. But those guys never felt super intimidating for Lubin, and Lubin even backed them down a little bit and went to work a couple times. And, he comes into the post game with the bedazzled belt. Lots of shade being thrown in this one. I'm sure that'll be talked about a lot on social media. A lot going on off the court. Obviously, Caleb Wilson has had his antics throughout the start to the season. Quadir Copeland's certainly not a guy who responds kindly to opposing smack talk, if you want to put it that way. And that obviously produced some high quality content. And then the final 10 plus point scorer for NC State was Paul McNeil. Does his thing, 4 of 6 from the field, 2 of 4 from 3-point range, 10 points, 7 rebounds. He was really, really big on the glass, which was an area of huge improvement for NC State, especially with Vesar and Wilson out of the game. NC State couldn't afford to be bludgeoned on the glass like it was against Miami. They needed to set the tone with some physicality, and they end up losing the rebounding battle, but only by 2, 40-38. North Carolina wasn't super active on the offensive glass, 17 to NC State's 12. So, they extended some possessions, but they weren't able to generate much. Second chance points, 12 for the Tar Heels and 17 for State. And the Wolfpack got back to its groove in the turnover battle, forced 12 Tar Heel turnovers. They're able to score 16 points off of those and, really operate well in transition, 13 fast break points. And finally, the points in the paint returned to form, 40 points in the paint to Carolina's 28. Carolina came out with kind of it, I think their best shot in this game was to light it up from 3-point range with their guards and hope those shots would fall. And that was really a ill-advised strategy. Let me put it to you that way. They shoot 5 of 33 from 3-point range in this game. Pretty terrible number, 15%. 32% from the field. More than half of their field goal attempts came from beyond 3-point range. So I'm thinking that the mindset was sort of We can blitz them with the three ball. And then that didn't work early. And NC State is sort of going to town in the paint and just taking advantage of mismatch after mismatch after mismatch. And it reached a point where their only chance to stay in the game was to keep hucking up threes. And, when your leading scorer with Visar and Wilson on the bench is Seth Trimble, and he goes 1 of 9 from the field with 4 points and 3 rebounds and doesn't make a 3-point shot, it's not a recipe for success. This UNC team is in some serious trouble down the stretch here without those two guys. I'm not sure when Visar will be available again, but they're definitely missing that paint presence without him, and Wilson is their engine. And there's going to be a lot of talk about how NC State beat them when they're diminished. And sure, that's true. They also won by 24 points. This was not a game that was ever in question. And I think that's such an important part of this. Like the Wolfpack was clearly the better squad out there. And I know, those two guys moved the needle a ton, but I still think this would have been a competitive matchup, even had those guys suited up. Would it have been much closer, and would Carolina have had a much better case in this game? Absolutely. I think this is a really strong Carolina team that is heavily dependent on two players, just as NC State is heavily dependent on, at least two guys getting hot basically in every game and just riding that wave. That's something that Will Wade doesn't like. But it's just kind of the nature of this season. It's the nature of this team and the nature, the identity of this group. So, I think you can nitpick that all you want. A win's a win. A ranked win is a ranked win. That's a big ranked win for NC State. I believe it's their second of the season, the first coming on the road against Clemson. And, it keeps them alive in this race for the top four in the ACC. Obviously, that took a big hit on Saturday with that loss to Miami, but um, things have a way of coming back. And, I think that win over Clemson is definitely looming large for the Tigers right now. I really do. I think Clemson has some fairly tough games left down the stretch here. They play Louisville, they play at North Carolina. Now, if this is the version of North Carolina, that doesn't bode well, but all NC State needs is a couple more losses for Clemson, and that looms very large. And I think the schedule is really difficult for the Wolfpack the rest of the way. But I also think that this team is capable of playing to a ceiling that, we saw tonight, um, with that performance. And I think if they play to that ceiling against some of these strong teams, then who knows? Kind of the sky's the limit type of thing for this group. And we'll see where they go from here. But they're not out of the hunt for that top four seed, and I think that bodes well. NC State gets a nice break here, week off away from the basketball court, recover. Who knows what the deal with Holloman's ankle is, and get Williams's face right. So, and it comes at this is a time that I think Will Wade would have preferred that bye week from, when they lost to Georgia Tech earlier in the season. I think he would have liked to have 2 weeks off essentially, but they get back in action, face Virginia next week. Lots of stuff to shake out in the ACC schedule over the next few days here. Some games still going on, or not going on tonight, but games to be played tomorrow. Clemson at Wake Forest, Virginia at Georgia Tech. Some other stuff over the weekend that NC State can kind of just sit back and watch, and hope that it helps, or prepared to recover if it hurts. So all in all, a really important win, a really important response for this NC State team. I think people will be, pleased with the way that this team responded to Wade's call. I know, there were definitely some opinions out there that NC State or that Wade was a little hard on this team. I and that he handled that post game poorly. I agree. There were timeouts in the back pocket that could have been called. I do think that the late game management wasn't ideal, but I also think NC State should never have been in that position to begin with. They were in control of that game with a 7 point lead, and I think the shock doesn't just happen to the team, it happens to the coaching staff too. And I don't think they could believe what they were watching. They had trust that their team was better than that. And obviously they were proven wrong. And so that kind of changed the calculus of the coaching style. And we'll see where they go from here. But I think Wade's got to be really pleased with his team's response and the direction and trajectory of this Wolfpack squad the rest of the way. As always, really appreciate you all tuning in to the NC State Insider Podcast. Feel free to follow me on social media at Senate Tucker. You can also follow the website at Wolfpack on SI, where we post all of our stories, and subscribe to the Sports Videos on SI YouTube channel for more episodes of the NC State Insider Podcast. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.